Let Top Notes 2019 Professional Education. For the continuing professional development seminar of the Bachelor of Education graduate to meet standards, the outcome should be in accordance with the Level 6. The graduate in the master's level is Level 7 and the doctorate level with Level 8 in the Philippine Qualifications Framework. Yes, for professionals to be globally competitive, the planning of continuing professional development programs should consider the ASEAN Qualifications Reference Framework. Sustained, lifelong, and self directed are characteristics of quality professional development. Teachers play the role of resource provider when they help their colleagues by sharing instructional resources such as websites and readings. Christine, the 10th grade language arts team leader, facilitates a team of hers. Teacher Christine plays the role of an expert. Expert. DepEd, a child and community-centered education system, or access, describes the learner-centered education that teachers ought to provide but not to include ethnocentric. Teacher Elmer encourages other teachers to examine how they can change his instructional practices to improve student engagement and achievement. How they can change his instructional practices to improve student engagement and achievement. So, Teacher Elmer plays the role of a catalyst for change. A catalyst for change. To shape the culture of their schools, improve student learning, and influence practice among their peers are roles that teacher leaders play. Teacher leaders play. Shape the culture, improve student learning, and influence practice among their peers. A global teacher is able to teach learners from diverse groups and cultures. Education Service Contracting Scheme point to the complementary roles of public and private institutions in the educational system. So, complementary roles of public and private institutions. True. True of alternative delivery modes or ADMs are addressing the learning needs of the marginalized pupils and those learners at risk of dropping out, and helping learners overcome social and economic constraints in their schooling. So that's true of alternative delivery modes. If the school acts as an agent of change, what is it expected to do? Enhance curriculum by localizing and indigenizing it with the help of the community. Enhance curriculum by localizing and indigenizing it with the help of community. An indicator of cultural sensitivity is knowing that differences exist between cultures. Knowing that differences exist between cultures. The aforementioned provisions of RA 10533, 10533, ano ba yung RA 10533? RA 10533 is Enhanced Basic Education Act, also known as the K-12. So the aforementioned provisions of RA 10533 make clear that schools should be community-centered. Community-centered. The ways by which schools can be learner-centered, according to the aforementioned provisions of RA 10533 are using mother tongue as language of instruction by making curriculum flexible and responsive to the community needs, and by indigenizing curriculum. Not implied in the aforementioned provisions of RA 10533 is that schools be independent of community, of course. Independent. So schools are not independent. They work together, 'di ba? As mentioned earlier. So schools should be community centered because the community can help them localize and indigenize the curriculum. And the next, In a knowledge-based economy, schools can act as agents of changes by equipping learners with lifetime skills such as knowledge, retrieval, comprehension, application, and utilization. Knowledge, retrieval, comprehension, application, and utilization. A progressive approach in transforming education that holistically critiques current shortcomings, failures, and discriminatory practices in education is multicultural education. It's a progressive approach, multicultural education. To enable learners to respond to the demands of the present world, schools should teach application-based, creative, critical, and innovative thinking. Application-based, creative, critical, and innovative thinking. An offshoot or a branch of the pillar of learning to live together is that students learn how to understand others and appreciate diversity among people. Not true of globalization is that, as advanced by the ASEAN heads of states, it has three distinct pillars: economic, social-cultural, and political community. Not true. Not three distinct pillars ng ASEAN heads of states. Education plays a vital role in sustainability by promoting health and teaching care for the environment. The following are attributes of a peace educator, except one that is motivated by service but expects rewards for services. A correct statement for Education for Sustainable Development, or ESD, Education for Sustainable Development, is that it concerns economic and social development and environmental protection. It concerns economic and social development and environmental protection. What pedagogy should schools adopt to help learners acquire the basic skills? Is to demonstrate skills needed and then let students perform the skills until mastery is achieved. So this is the kind of pedagogy that schools should adopt. Demonstrate skills and let students perform the skills until mastery. True of the alternative learning system, remember alternative learning system is that it is a learning system parallel to the formal system. Parallel siya ng formal system of learning. Ang alternative learning system. Recall natin yung kanina. Sabi kanina, ADMs, alternative delivery modes, alternative learning systems. So they're similar. They help students. Anyway, learning system parallel to the formal system. An integrated school offers complete basic education in one school site and has unified instructional programs. According to RA 9155, do you remember 9155? What is 9155? 9155 is DepEd. 9155, DepEd. 9155, DepEd. Again, 9155, 9155, DepEd, DepEd. So according to RA 9155, the heart of the formal education system is the school. Heart of the formal educational system. Yes, an alien is qualified to take the licensure examination for teachers provided his or her country has reciprocity with the Philippines in the practice of the teaching profession. Yes, after 2002, there is another way of obtaining a professional teacher's license other than passing the LET, and that is by applying for the conversion of one's professional board examination for teachers, so PBET, passing rating to a license. So that is the only other way of getting a license. It's that if you already have a license, yung luma lang, yung PBET, papalitan mo lang siya, co-convert to LET. Otherwise, a licensed professional teacher cannot teach after continuous 5 years of not practicing the teaching profession unless He or she has earned 12 units of refresher course in education. Ilang units? 12. Ilang units? 12. How many years hindi nakapagturo? 5. 5. 5 years hindi nakapagturo. Provided for in Article 14 of the 1987 Philippine Constitution is the protection of intellectual property rights. Is the protection of intellectual property rights. A statement is not true of CHED is that it is in charge of education programs in all levels. So CHED is not in charge of all levels kasi 'di ba CHED nga Commission on Higher Education. So pang higher education lang siya. The goal that does not achieve global education is the increase in adult illiteracy by 50%. So not achieve. Modesty, this is the name of a girl. Modesty has not practiced her teaching profession for the past 5 years. She should take 12 units of education courses. Take 12 units of education courses before she is allowed to teach. The pillar of education developed most when one prepares and does PowerPoint presentation is learning to do. Learning to do. When the teacher encourages the students to analyze issues, think critically about information given them, and help develop their skills on their own, the pillar of learning that she tries to develop is learning to know. Learning to know. Students analyze issues, think critically about information given them. Based on the preamble, teachers are duly licensed who possess dignity and reputation with high moral values as well as technical and professional competence. Professor Santos should continually improve herself or himself personally and professionally to uphold the highest possible standard of education. So you continue to improve yourself, personally and professionally, so you can uphold the highest possible standard of education. According to the Professional Code of Ethics for Professional Teachers, not stated as quality of a professional teacher is that he or she has passion for teaching. So, yung passion for teaching, wala yan sa Professional Code of Ethics, okay? That's your intrinsic. Miss Arcel can connect with her students like a magnet. Her personal quality is passion and humor. Passion and humor. A person is held responsible for his action because he has a choice. The process by which children become participating and functioning members of society by fitting into an organized way of life is socialization. Again, the process by which children become participating and functioning members of society by fitting into an organized way of life is socialization. Socialization. Approach every pupil as he or she is without allowing yourself to be influenced by your knowledge of his or her background. Is an advice from a or an existentialist phenomenologist. Existentialist phenomenologist. So when you approach a pupil, you approach and see the pupil as he is. You don't allow yourself to be influenced by your knowledge of his background. So that is an advice from an existentialist phenomenologist. This best describes the role of a teacher from a perennialist perspective. To reveal the wisdom of the ages forever, perennial, such as those contained in the Bible or Quran. The recent educational development relates with perennialism. It relates with perennialism. The recent educational development. It's exercising the students' higher order thinking skills. Exercising the students' higher order thinking skills. The teacher believes that it is better to use the old and traditional methods than to experiment with new techniques in classroom teaching. So she likes to use old and traditional methods. So she is an essentialist. She's an essentialist. The idea that the pragmatic teacher reject is that values are objective. So the pragmatic teacher reject is that values are objective. In problem-based learning, the kind of problem that the teacher should give are those with many possible answers. So divergent, many possible answers. So problem-based learning makes use of problems with no clear-cut answer. Cooperative learning ends with members reflecting on the cooperative process they went through. Good discipline is characterized by self-direction. Good discipline is characterized by self-direction. Okay, here are some different techniques on studying. Most appropriate or best strategy or technique. Teacher Carla wants her grade 7 students to express their opinions, sentiments, and ideas regarding a certain government issue in the national level. So the best is forum. Forum. Next, Miss Demi wants to let her class learn that in the formation of ice cubes, the surrounding surface of the water freezes first before the others, and to show that water expands rather than contracts when frozen. So this is a laboratory activity. Laboratory activity, syempre. So you want your class to learn about ice cubes and to show them how water expands. Laboratory activity. Next one, Teacher Gretsch designed a lesson where she wanted her students to design an activity on the effect of changing the temperature of water on the dissolving rate of sugar. So she designed a lesson. She wants her students to design an activity on the effect of something. So this is inquiry. Effect inquiry. Next one, Mrs. Rivera wants to help her students retain new information learned from their lesson in earth science. Retain, so you can use mnemonics. Very easy, mnemonics. Next, to yield greater discussion, to yield greater interaction, you use discussion. Discussion is used to yield greater interaction. And last one, Jenieka showed a video in her class about the life in an urban poor community. She wants to determine how the video changed students' thoughts about the life of these underprivileged people. Becomes reflection log. Reflection log. Teacher Ruwen is trying to develop learners' ability to derive the meaning of words co-occurring with the unknown word. Is an example of using semantics. So very easy, semantics. The strategies that belong to both expository and exploratory approach are deductive and cooperative. The strategies that belong to both expository and exploratory approach are deductive and cooperative. The teacher exemplifies the generative approach of instruction. If the teacher provides opportunities to students to make own linkages to prior knowledge. So the teacher provides opportunities to students to make own linkages to prior knowledge. So she is doing a generative approach of instruction. Generative is produce or generate. A student is late to school every morning. It would be best for the teachers to investigate the student's home condition. Investigate the student's home condition. A bright student asks the teacher a difficult question that the latter cannot answer. The teacher should tell the student frankly that she does not know. In other books, you can ask the question to other students and then research on it later. Next, a slow learner completely learn a particular skill in school by presenting to him the lesson thrice or more in varied forms. So this is interesting. If you have a slow learner, and you want them to learn a particular skill, you have to present him the lesson 3 times, 3 or more, in varied forms, in different forms. It's like from the movie we watch. A technique may be successful in one situation but may fail in another because instructional situations vary. So it's natural. And that's not always successful, not always a failure. It varies. Substandard teaching competence of teachers may cause a poor classroom instruction. So, substandard teaching competence, of course, pag hindi magaling yung teacher or below the required standard, so it will cause a poor classroom instruction. Teachers may manifest good time management in school by devoting their time in instructional activities. So they can have good time management if they devote their time in instructional activities. There is a district math contest. The best way of selecting the representative to show the human social functions of school is for the teacher to conduct competitive exams in math to determine the best representative. So the teacher will conduct competitive exams. The correct practice in handling students' records are the following. 1. Records are kept for safekeeping in filing cabinets. And 2. Feedbacks about children's performance are given to parents. 1. Records are kept for safekeeping in filing cabinets. 2. Feedbacks about children's performance are given to parents. The best way to do when the lesson is done ahead of time allotment is to provide filler activities. Provide filler activities. A teacher who says girls are emotional and very sensitive while boys are not is practicing gender stereotyping. Gender stereotyping. A correct example of the deductive method of teaching is when the teacher starts by defining a term, then gives example. So deductive method, the teacher gives a term, a definition of the term, then gives examples. Teacher A consults students and parents, but she makes the decision. She makes the decision. The classroom management style that teacher A observes is consultative. Consultative. A democratic teacher will allow the group to make the decision together. Yes, this is correct. Democratic teacher will allow the group to make the decision together. Continuously scanning the classroom even when the teacher is working with small groups illustrates Robert Konin's withitness. A child who is having a difficulty containing himself is asked to do an errand. It's antiseptic bouncing and was employed. The question that could not be answered when curricularists do curriculum mapping is, are my students learning? Are my students learning? The condition that most likely could help in the fast and smooth implementation of the K-12 curriculum in schools of the Philippines is the decrease the restraining forces. Decrease the restraining forces. An outcomes-based approach to lesson planning begins with outcomes. An outcomes-based approach to lesson planning begins with outcomes. Constructive alignment means in outcomes-based lesson planning that constructive alignment means in outcomes-based lesson planning that the learning outcomes are the basis of teaching, learning activities, and assessment tasks. Learning outcomes are the basis. Teacher M wants to treat a particular lesson from the point of view of different subjects. The lesson planning that he observes is thematic. Thematic. At the association or comparison phase, the lesson is linked to daily life. So daily life lesson is linked to daily life, association or comparison phase. The phase or phases of the lesson where a teacher would know if the student really learned what was intended for him to learn are application and generalization. Application and generalization. So this is the phase of the lesson when the teacher knows if the student really learned what was intended for him to learn. In a backward design approach to curriculum and lesson planning, The one that comes ahead is identifying results desired. Identifying results desired. This is the backward design approach to curriculum and lesson planning. This is the one that comes ahead. So this is a no. The next one is a no. In understanding by design, or UBD, understanding by design, UBD, developing an instructional plan does not come right after identifying desired results. Okay? Developing instructional plan does not come right after identifying desired results. Siyempre, bakit naman mauuna ang results bago yung plan? So, plan first bago results. And also, understanding by design, or UBD, insist on identifying assessment evidence of learning right after identifying desired learning results so that teaching learning becomes more focused and organized. UBD insist on identifying assessment evidence of learning right after identifying desired learning results so that the teaching learning becomes more focused and organized. Teacher has been a constructivist in his approach to lesson planning. Ano ba ang constructivist sa approach ng lesson planning? It's the features of his lessons are: students are engaged in learning. Students guide their own learning and meaning making. Constructivist. Students are engaged and they guide their own learning and meaning making. Another one is true of a constructivist lesson planning approach is that students are building their own understanding. Students are building their own understanding. Another one, in a constructivist lesson planning approach, unacceptable naman to. Unacceptable is that learners accept blindly what teacher teaches because she is an authority on the subject. Again, pag constructivist ang teacher, ang approach niya ay ang students ay engaged, they guide their own learning and they have meaning making and they build their own understanding. Okay? If curriculum is planned following the behavioral approach, the sequence that is correct is, okay, so curriculum, this is a behavioral approach for curriculum. Ang sequence ay start with the setting of objectives and goals. Next, learning outcomes are evaluated along goals and objectives set at the start. Next, change in behavior indicates the measure of the accomplishment. So, una ay setting of objectives and goals. And then, you evaluate learning outcomes kasabay ng goals and objectives na ginawa mo sa simula. And then, may change in behavior. Doon mo malaman na measure mo na yung accomplishments. If curriculum is planned following the humanistic approach, the feature applies is that it is very child-centered. So, pag ang curriculum ay humanistic approach, it is child-centered. Humanistic approach, child-centered. Let's go to the other question nga, yung previous. Behavioral approach. So, una, actually this is the second one here. Start with the setting of objectives and goals. Next, learning outcomes are evaluated along goals and objectives set at the start. And last one, change in behavior indicates the measure of the accomplishments. A humanistic approach to curriculum planning has the following features except subject matter is not necessary in curriculum planning. So, hindi siya humanistic. Bakit nawala yung subject? Of course, it's still important. That's why you're learning. When a school applies the system's approach to curriculum planning, expected is that the parts of the school system are considered in terms of how they relate to each other. The parts of the school system are considered in terms of how they relate to each other. So, ang dami nating approach, curriculum approach. Okay. Another one for systems approach to curriculum. External stakeholders should be apart since they are part of the school system. So yes, external stakeholders should be a part since they are part of the school system. When one wants children to develop positive attitude toward life and problems, the approach in curriculum planning that is most appropriate is problem-centered approach. Problem-centered approach. Oo nga naman. You have to be able to learn how to develop positive attitude. So, dapat sa curriculum mo, merong problem-centered approach. E-learning may either be synchronous or asynchronous. What applies to synchronous learning is that all participants interact at the same time. Kaya nga, synchronicity, sabay. Applies to asynchronous learning is that it is self-paced. Asynchronous learning, self-paced. On the other hand, synchronous learning is all participants interact at the same time. Stay on the right side view as you talk when you write on the chalkboard while busy discussing your lesson in front of the class. So, you stay on the right side view as you talk. Okay? In preparing instructional materials, the kind of graphics that is effective on computer screens are simple graphics with corresponding text. Simple graphics with corresponding text. The combination promotes legibility on projected materials are dark letters against light background. So, dark letters against light background. That is the combination that promotes legibility on projected materials. The main reason for leaving a silent space around the edge of a chart is to increase readability. To increase readability. That's why there is a silent space around the edge of a chart. The main purpose of using audio-visual aids in teaching is to get the interest and hold the attention of the learners. Balance lang din. The part of the screen of a computer has a strong influence among learners is the left half of the screen. Oh, the part of the screen of a computer has a strong influence among learners is the left half of the screen. Interesting. Learners learn better when all their senses are involved. The activity classified under direct purposeful experience is setting the table. Setting the table. This is the activity classified under direct purposeful experience. So learners learn better when all their senses are involved. The purpose of music in a media presentation is to provide continuity. Provide continuity. To increase the readability of printed media, the kind of letters that should be used for long statements or paragraphs is a combination of upper and lower case letters. A combination of upper and lower case letters. Mock-up. Mock-up can be used by a teacher to show the functioning part of a whole. Mock-up can be used by a teacher to show the functioning part of a whole. Teacher B wants to make use of a simulated life condition suitable for animals and plants living on land. She can use terrarium. Terrarium, of course, for turtles, you use terrarium. Images are key elements of a PowerPoint presentation. Images are key elements of a PowerPoint presentation. Your reason for not using them is to use images to decorate. Use images to decorate. So you don't use it only to decorate. That's not a good reason at all. The 6-6 principle in PowerPoint presentation means, there's a 6-6 principle in PowerPoint presentation. So 6 lines only or less. 6 lines only or less and 6 words only or less. 6 words only or less. Wow. Okay. A cluttered chalkboard may confuse your students. Don't write too much. This is a teacher's action that follow this thought. So a cluttered chalkboard may confuse your students. Don't write too much. In the learning situation described before this item, the best assessment type that teacher Mary may employ is product-based type. So there's another item for this. So product-based type. The best assessment type that teacher Mary may employ in the learning situation described before this item is product-based type. Where is the item? Anyways, learning outcome. Learning outcome. Distinguish between plant and animal cell. The test item aligned is to distinguish between a plant and animal cell, as is. That's the learning outcome, and that's the test item. Aligned sila sa isa't isa. Okay, learning outcome. Dance tango to the tune of La Comparsita. The test item aligned is to dance tango as the music La Comparista is played. So, pinalit lang yung to the tune of sa is played. They're basically the same. As the music is played, to the tune of. So the same learning outcome and test item are aligned. Another is learning outcome. Construct valid test item. The test item aligned is to the test item aligned is to listen. Formulate a valid test item for this learning outcome. The students must be able to supply the correct and or tag questions. Question. The students must be able to supply the correct and or tag question. Learning outcome again, construct valid test item. The test item aligned is to formulate a valid test item for this learning outcome. The students may be able to supply the correct and or tag question. Learning outcome. Use the correct tense of verb in sentences. The aligned test item is am going or go to school every day. So that's the learning outcome. Use the correct tense of verb in sentences. The aligned test item is I am going, I go to school every day. So it's the same tense. It's correct. Learning outcome, the tense of verb, and the test item is that sentence I said. Learning outcome. Draw conclusion from observations. The aligned test item is what conclusion can you draw on the basis of your observations? So, ang learning outcome, I draw conclusions from observations, and then the test item is what conclusion can you draw on the basis of your observations? So, it's so obvious. Don't be confused. You can do this. Next, learning outcome. Take a stand on the issue on same-sex marriage and defend the same. The aligned test item is, do you favor same-sex marriage? Why or why not? Okay. So take a stand. You choose a side. That's your learning outcome. Take a stand. And then your aligned test item is, do you favor? So they are similar. You just decide, you choose. A proof of constructive alignment is when the intended learning outcomes are aligned to the learning activities and performance task. So that's constructive alignment. The intended learning outcomes are aligned to the learning activities and performance tasks. Teacher wants her students to learn how to live in collaboration with others. The teaching learning activity that will be aligned is project-based learning. So this is how to live in collaboration with others. Project-based learning. A school wants to make its students globally aware by making students understand others' perspectives and cultures. Making students understand others' perspectives and cultures. So teachers should do too. If schools want students to become self-directed learners, they should employ more metacognitive strategy. Metacognitive strategy to be self-directed. Teacher R's lesson for grade 3 is on the history of the town. There is no existing reference material in the library. He or she can tap the elders in the community. The elders in the community. Oh, this is good. So, you cannot find an existing reference material in the library about the history of the town, so you just ask the elders in the community. True 1C is getting to be a problem in school B. True 1C is getting to be a problem in school B. What is true 1C? So, true 1C is someone who stays out of school without permission. Pala absent. True 1C. So it's getting to be a problem in school B. Students cut classes after recess after morning class. Parents and community can help by serving as security guards to check on truant students. So the parents and community can help by serving as security guards to check on truant students. The statement is true about teaching vocabulary. So vocabulary can be taught directly and indirectly. Vocabulary can be taught directly and indirectly. A limited vocabulary is a setback to efficient reading. This statement implies about the learner to be equipped with certain skills to attack unfamiliar words. Be equipped with certain skills to attack unfamiliar words. Jessa lacks originality and imagination in her speech. The words she uses and her speech patterns reveal a dull, unquestioning mind. Jess's speech may be described as banal. Banal. So banal means lacking originality, freshness, lacking originality and freshness. So again, Jessa lacks originality and imagination daw. Oh, narinig mo na yung originality and imagination. So it means banal. So the words she uses and her speech patterns reveal a dull, unquestioning mind. So her speech is banal. Not a characteristic of a good question is that it is self-answering. So if you answer your own question, that's not a characteristic of a good question. A reader uses metacognition when she previews the text and makes predictions. That's one. Again, a reader uses metacognition when 1. She previews the text and makes predictions. 2. Makes connections to personal experience or other texts. 3. Asks clarifying questions. Again, she previews the text and makes predictions, makes connections to personal experience or other texts, asks clarifying questions. So we have encountered this make connection to personal experience. So if you make a connection to a personal experience, that's metacognition. At least what it says here. That's what it says. A reader uses metacognition, another one. A reader uses metacognition when she 1. Identifies difficult sentences or passages. So if you can say, this is hard, you can identify, you use metacognition. Another 2, restates a sentence or passage in her own words. Restates a sentence or passage in her own words. And last one, reacts to the text. Reacts to the text. Okay? The following are examples of thinking stems or sentence starters that can prompt reflective thinking. Again, these are thinking stems or sentence starters to prompt reflective thinking. 1. I'm thinking. 2. I'm wondering. And 4. From what I read, I realize. Okay, so thinking, wondering, and realize. Enjoyment of reading does not belong to the external factors that affect reading point of reference. Enjoyment of reading does not belong to the external factors that affect reading point of reference. The factors relate to high reading achievement are Factors that relate to high reading achievement are 1. Rich home literacy environment. Rich home literacy environment. 2. Reading enjoyment. And 3. Confidence in reading. This is very nice. So, rich home literacy environment, you enjoy, and then you're confident. The following are metacognitive processes that enhance learning. 1. Monitoring progress as one learns. 2. Adjusting strategies if they are perceived ineffective. 3. Goal setting. Remembering does not belong to metacognitive processes. Of course, that's only remembered. There is no single best method in motivating learners. So if you know that you gave it your all, just remember there is no single best method in motivating learners. The elements that must be present for goal setting to be an effective motivation tool are, so elements for goal setting to be an effective motivation tool are 1. Goal acceptance. 2. Specificity. You have to be specific. 3. Challenge. 4. Performance monitoring. And 5. Performance feedback. Again, 1. Goal acceptance. 2. Specificity. 3. Challenge. 4. Performance monitoring. And 5. Performance feedback. In the formal operational stage, do you remember these? Mga operational? This is under Jean Piaget. So in the formal operational stage, adolescents are capable of doing the following to solve a problem. 1. Formulate hypothesis. 2. Systematically test hypothesis. 3. Reason out. Pag operational, formal operational, formulate hypothesis, systematically test hypothesis, reason out. Metacognition refers to the act of a learner who reflects on his or her own thinking. Health does not belong to cognitive factors affecting learning. Non-cognitive processes related to learning and aging include the following except intelligence. So this intelligence is not related to learning and aging. No. Non-cognitive processes related to learning and aging include the following except intelligence. Using cues, establishing learning conditions that reduce interference, and using advanced organizers can help minimize memory deficit in learning. So cues, good learning conditions, and advanced organizers help minimize memory deficit in learning. The following characterize successful learners. So successful learners are active, goal-directed, self-regulating, assume personal responsibility for contributing to their own learning. This is very nice and very true. So a successful learner is active, goal-directed, self-regulating, and assume personal responsibility for contributing to their own learning. This is nice. In Bruner's three-tiered learning, in active EN, and active learning is action-based. Action-based. The law that states that we tend to fill the gaps in figures as we perceive them is law of closure. Law of closure. So this is the law that states that we tend to fill the gaps in figures as we perceive them. Based on Freud's theory, the superego operates when Andrew lends his bicycle to his friend Julius, who was crying for it. So, si superego daw yun. Pag pinahiram niya sa friend niya, yung bike niya, sa friend niya umiiyak kasi gustong sumakay sa bike niya. Professor Passis measures learning by the outward expression of new behaviors, only such as ability to solve math with ease. The theory she applies is behaviorist theory. Behaviorist theory. If you provide positive reinforcement whenever a learner performs an acceptable behavior on her own, your conviction is based on the principle of behaviorism. Principle of behaviorism. So my positive enforcement, you provide positive enforcement, reinforcement. So your conviction is based on principle of behaviorism. Behaviorism. Maturationist theory advanced that development is a biological process that occurs automatically on predictable sequential stage over time. Maturationist theory advanced that development is a biological process that occurs automatically on predictable sequential stage over time. Scaffolding encouraged children to discover and learn above their level, but with help from the teacher. Scaffolding. Ken likes to go to school. He enjoyed school on day one. The behaviorist theory explains this. Behaviorist theory explains this. Learning is viewed as collections of responses to external stimuli. Learning is viewed as collections of responses to external stimuli. This is the thought of the behaviorist. Behaviorist. A person's behavior, environment, and personal qualities all reciprocally influence each other correctly and completely explains Bandura's reciprocal determinism. What is reciprocal determinism? A person's behavior, environment, and personal qualities all reciprocally influence each other. Not true of behaviorists is that free will plays a role in a person's development. So not true of behaviorists yan. Free will, no. Wala yan sa behaviorists. But true of behaviorists naman, true, is that they focus solely on students' observable behaviors as the indicators of learning. So they observe the behavior to see if learning is made. The successful learner can link new information with existing knowledge in meaningful ways. The constructivist subscribes to such thoughts. The successful learner can link new information with existing knowledge in meaningful ways. The constructivist subscribes to such thought. Jerome Bruner and Edgar Dale agree that for effective teaching learning, teachers should begin with the concrete or the specific. So that's Jerome Bruner and Edgar Dale agree that for effective teaching learning, teachers should begin with concrete. They also advise teachers for effective teaching learning to move from concrete to abstract. Move from concrete to abstract. Local politics does not belong to the Bronfenbrenner's microsystem as a factor on human development. Local politics does not belong to Bronfenbrenner's microsystem as a factor on human development. The child's parent and teacher are at odds is an example of a child's mesosystem that does not work favorably for the child. So mesosystem yan. Mesosystem if the child's parent and teacher are at odds. Let's have a short review of Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems theory. Again, this is Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems theory. We have the mimemak. What is mi? Micro. What is me? Meso. What is e? Exo. What is ma? Macro. What is si? Chrono. So microsystem. First, microsystem mi. Child and mom, child and teacher, child and father. So anything, na may child and immediate environment. Ang meso naman, mesosystem is the relationship of the surroundings of the child. Surroundings ng child. So wala yung child. For example, relationship ng parents, and in the case of what I read earlier, the relationship between the teacher and the child's parent. So they are not in good terms. So this is an example of a mesosystem. Exosystem is bigger than the family but not the whole nation. bigger than the family, not whole nation. For example, local politics, workplace, and school. Work, workplace, local politics, and school. These are examples of exosystem. Exosystem. So, balikan natin kanina, sabi, local politics does not belong to the Bronfenbrenner's microsystem. Kasi remember, micro is the child and an immediate environment. But, ang sinabi local politics, saan ba yung local politics? It's under exosystem. Exosystem. Macro system, nationwide. And chronosystem, abroad or life events. Next, let's move on to the next. Based on Ausubel's subsumption theory, present the most general ideas of a subject first, and then progressively differentiate in terms of detail and specificity. That's Ausubel's subsumption theory. Let's talk about Ausubel a little bit. So, si David Ausubel's subsumption theory. David Ausubel is under constructivist learning theories. So the subsumption theory was developed by David Ausubel, and this theory emphasizes how individuals learn large amounts of meaningful material from both verbal and textual presentations in a school setting. So the use of advanced organizers is a useful way of learning. Subsumption means to put or include something within something larger or more comprehensive. A person learns something from what he already knows. An individual's cognitive structure consists of all his learning experiences that make up his knowledge of facts, concepts, and other data. Sometimes some of these are forgotten because they are integrated into larger structures of knowledge. So the subsumption theory presents four learning processes where a piece of new knowledge is assimilated into an existing cognitive structure. We have the anyway, those are four. So it's meaningful reception theory, again under the constructivist theory. So going back, based on Ausubel's subsumption theory, present the most general ideas of a subject first, and then progressively differentiate in terms of detail and specificity. Next, we have Tolman's. Tolman's term of latent learning means learning which is not manifested at the time of learning, but which manifests later when a suitable motivation and circumstance appears. So, saying more about latent learning. So, it's from Tolman's purposive behaviorism. Latent learning is a form of learning that occurs without any visible reinforcement of the behavior or associations that are learned. So it occurs every time an organism sees a reason to perform or show it. For example, a 4-year-old boy observes his father in using the TV remote control. When he would be left alone and had the opportunity to turn on the TV, he could easily demonstrate the learning. Behaviorists explain forgetting. So forgetting, this is about forgetting. Behaviorists explain forgetting as gradual cessation of a response as a result of passage of time. Gradual cessation of a response as a result of passage of time, and no repetition of the behavior for a long time. No repetition of the behavior for a long time. That's forgetting. Do you remember that question na kasama yung forgetting sa choices? So let's just talk about pruning. Pruning is the degradation of synapses and dying off of neurons due to lack of experience. That's pruning. Degradation of synapses and dying off of neurons or lack of experience. Highlighting students' failure does not belong with teachers' scaffolds in mind, of course. Social reconstructionism asserts that learners generate knowledge and meaning from an interaction between their experiences and their ideas. Infancy is when physical growth is fastest. Just double check. But piña is the no, the acronym for the stages that people physically grow physically fast. Next, Redmond often wears a headphone while working with his school projects in school campus. When asked why, he said he just wants to stay focused when he works. Redmond is an analytical and intrapersonal kind of learner. Intrapersonal kind of learner. Well-liked children can read and respond to peers' emotions better than children who are not well-liked. This research application is Erickson's psychosocial theory of development. Aww. Well-liked children can read and respond to peers' emotions better than children who are not well-liked. The condition that most likely brings about a classroom climate that is businesslike yet non-threatening is when rules, limits, and expectations are made clear during the first day of classes. SLA child with hearing loss is likely to have language delay as well. This proves that speech is easily influenced by other aspects. Studies on delinquent students recommend effective authoritative parenting style for adolescents. So in this case, authoritative is a good word. So it means you are self-confident and respect. You exude respect. Researchers have found that executive functioning is a better predictor of school readiness rather than IQ. An implication of this to the teaching learning process is to strengthen executive functioning among learners. Strengthen executive functioning among learners. 1. Self-control. 2. Working memory. 3. Flexible thinking. Self-control, working memory, flexible thinking are dimensions of executive functioning that are most important to child cognitive development. A teacher should have more nurturing of learners' sense of independence and self-efficacy in class to create a growth mindset. To build strong and healthy relationship in class, criticizing and blaming should be out of the picture. Of course. Differentiated instruction is when there is atmosphere that is favorable for learning, ensures that what a learner learns, how he or she learns it, is a match for his or her readiness level, interests, and preferred mode of learning. So that's differentiated instruction. In a favorable learning environment, which competition promotes learning? Against standards set. Standard set. For a positive learning environment, it is good to make clear that an individual's beliefs and activities should be understood by others in terms of that individual's own culture. Which concept is explained? Well, what do you think this is? For a positive learning environment, it is good to make clear that an individual's beliefs and activities should be understood by others in terms of that individual's own culture. Which concept is explained? Cultural relativism. A test was given to the students by Mr. Lapid to determine what students already know and not know about the subject before he taught. He gave a Pre-test. Mrs. D is doing an assessment of learning. Which of the following questions would she likely consider? I would ask, what grade should I assign to each student? What grade should I assign for each student? Assessment of learning. An achievement test measures quality and quantity of previous learning. Quality and quantity of previous learning. That is an achievement tests. Students do an actual demonstration of their skill. This is an administrative use of tests. Actual demonstration of their skill. Students do and administrative use of tests. Considering that tests were found to have poor psychometric status, psychologists recommend that tests be supplemented by other assessment methods. Tests be supplemented by other assessment methods. Essay is the assessment task aligned to this outcome. Analyze the socio-cultural factors that affect learning. So this is an assessment task. The assessment task best for this is essay. Analyze the socio-cultural factors that affect learning. Here is a learning outcome. Interpret assessment results. How should this be assessed? So interpret assessment results, that's the learning outcome. So should be assessed. Present data on score distribution, mean, standard deviation, then ask the students to interpret the meaning of the data. Present data on score distribution, mean, standard deviation, then ask the students to interpret the meaning of the data. So that's the learning outcome. That's how you should assess if your learning outcome is interpret assessment results. By means of a diagram, compare a plant and an animal cell. This should be assessed by means of a Venn diagram. You can compare a plant and an animal cell. Which should be one of the criteria? Quality of answers to questions. Quality of answers to questions. What can be an additional criterion against which the defense of the research paper can be assessed? What can be an additional criterion against which the defense of the research paper can be assessed? Ability to integrate, and connect one part of the research paper to other parts to explain a point. Ability to integrate, connect one part of the research paper to other parts to explain a point. What is an advantage of a 4-point scale rubric? 4-point scale rubric. There is no column for undecided. Everyone has to make a choice. If you have to relabel the levels of the criteria, what can be a substitute for poor? What can be a substitute for poor if you have to relabel the levels? It's, you say, does not meet expectations. Does not meet expectations. Blank is a part of speech that describes a verb and an adjective. What is wrong with this completion test item? What is wrong? Okay, the blank is at the beginning of the sentence. So that is wrong. Here is a true or false test. Based on research findings, girls usually develop earlier than boys. What is faulty with the test item? First, it makes use of a specific determiner, like usually. You don't use usually. The word usually gives clue to the answer. Mrs. Rosal deducting points in students' test scores due to poor penmanship lowers the validity of the test. Lowers the validity of the test. Which statement correctly applies to a student who got a score of 70 in a given test? Which statement correctly applies to a student who got a score of 70 in a given test? He obtained a raw score. He obtained a raw score of 70. 70. The raw score of a student in a mathematics test is equivalent to a t-score of 70. What does his score mean? So the raw score daw of a student in a math test is equivalent to a t-score of 70. What does his score mean? 2 SDs above the mean. 2 standard deviations above the mean. Skewed to the left or negatively skewed means good students. Most got high scores. Effective teaching. Okay. So mode is greater than the median and the median is greater than the mean. This is skewed to the right or positively skewed. It means poor students, most got low scores, ineffective teaching. So you remember this? If the mode is big, median is big, the mode is bigger than the median and the median is bigger than the mean, so it's skewed to the right. Poor students. Pero pag ang other way around, if mean is greater than the median and the median is greater than the mode, a score distribution follows a normal curve. And what does this mean? Most of the scores pile up between -1 standard deviation to +1 standard deviation. Anne wants to determine students' attitude toward cheating. She asked them to rate several statements on the extent to which they agree. What assessment tool did she use? She used attitude scale. What does a test item with a negative discrimination index indicate? What does a test item with a negative discrimination index indicate? The test item may not be reliable. The test item may not be reliable. What is a probable cause of a test item with a negative discrimination index? What is a probable cause of a test item with a negative discrimination index? Item vague and is open to many interpretations. Item is vague and is open to many interpretations. Student Queenie got a percentile score of 85. What does this mean? Student Queenie got a percentile score of 85. What does this mean? She belongs to the upper 15% of the examinees. She belongs to the upper 15% of the examinees. Students were asked to nominate the first 3 classmates he or she wants to be with. For this project, using a sheet of paper is an example of sociometric technique. Sociometric technique. So when students were asked to nominate the first 3 classmates they want to be with, this is used sociometric technique. Which of the following information about a student is the least confidential? Least confidential. It's the periodical test record. Periodical test record. Responding. Responding is when you do something and you take action. Is the second level in the objectives in the affective domain manifested in agreeing to try and volunteering for. Frequency inventory is an appropriate tool for this. Frequency inventory is an appropriate tool for responding. Which assessment tool is most appropriate in the assessment of the internalization of a value? Internalization of a value. It's conflict story. Conflict story. Norm reference grading explains score type in percentile, stenine, quartile, or decile. So that's norm reference grading. Why is performance given the largest weight in TLE and MAPE? Because they are dominantly physical skills subjects. Based on DepEd Order 8 series of 2015, how are kinder pupils graded? By the use of checklists and portfolios. By the use of checklists and portfolios. What does DepEd consider most significant aspect in grade giving? What does DepEd consider the most significant aspect in grade giving? The demonstration of what was learned. The demonstration of what was learned. Are the core values. What are the core values? So the core values are makadiyos, makatao, makakalikasan, and makabansa. So are the core values makadiyos, makatao, makakalikasan, and makabansa graded in the report card? Yes, by the use of non-numerical rating scale. By the use of non-numerical rating scale. When is a learner retained in the same grade level? When he doesn't meet expectations in 3 subjects. When he doesn't meet expectations in 3 subjects. Why is performance given the largest weight? Again, yun pa rin. or largest weight in TLE and MAPE because they are dominantly physical skill subjects. What happens if a learner fails in 2 subjects? Okay, he gets promoted on condition that he goes through a remedial class and finally gets an average of 75 with his last failing grade. Great! Congratulations!